In the United States, an airline that takes your confirmed seat and lands you 2 hours late owes you 400% of your one-way fare. In cash, that same day, at that same airport, up to $2,150. You have heard the announcement at the gate. So, why would anyone raise their hand? The answer is written down. It sits in United States Federal Regulation, Title 14, Part 250, and in the written notice that same rule forces the airline to hand you. 3 things decide what you walk away with, whether you volunteered, how late you land, and what the airline is allowed to pay you with. Start with the word volunteer because the rule defines it, and that definition is the whole story. Section 250.2b says a volunteer is a passenger who accepts the airline's offer of compensation, in any amount, in exchange for giving up a confirmed seat. In any amount, read that again, there is no floor, there is no minimum. Whatever they offer is the deal, because you agreed it was. Most passengers read the raised hand as the clever move, something instead of nothing, the quick traveler taking the free money while everyone else stares at their phone. Now read the next sentence of the same rule. Any other passenger denied boarding counts as denied boarding involuntarily. Denied boarding means the airline refuses to carry someone holding a confirmed reservation. Involuntary means you never agreed to give it up. And this is the part that catches people. Taking the money afterward does not turn you into a volunteer. The category is fixed at the moment you accept the offer before you surrender the seat. That single moment decides which of 2 completely different payment systems you are standing in. One of them is a negotiation. The other one is a formula. The rule also fixes the order of events. Section 250.9 says nobody can be denied boarding against their will until airline staff first ask for volunteers who will give up their reservation in exchange for compensation of the airline's choosing. Compensation of the airline's choosing. That phrase is doing quiet work. Read the sequence as a business process instead of a courtesy, and it changes shape. The airline gets the first move, at a price it sets itself, and the federal formula is the fallback that only fires when the cheap route fails. That same section does something else, and almost nobody uses it. Section 250.9 requires every airline to furnish a written statement that explains denied boarding compensation and describes the boarding priority rules it uses to decide who gets left behind. Passengers bumped involuntarily receive it automatically, but the rule goes further. The airline has to hand that statement to any person who asks for it, at any airport ticket counter it staffs, and at any boarding location it is using. Any person, on request, before anything has gone wrong. The document explaining how that airline ranks you is sitting behind the desk you are already standing in front of, and asking for it costs nothing. So, what does the fallback actually pay? It does not start with your inconvenience. It starts with a clock. For a domestic United States itinerary, Section 250.5 compares one thing against another, when your original flight was supposed to land, against when the airline's replacement actually gets you there. Land 1 hour late or less, and the federal compensation is 0, not a reduced amount. 0, the airline solved the problem fast enough, and under this rule, it owes you nothing. More than 1 hour late, but less than 2, and the number becomes 200% of your one-way fare, capped at $1,075. One-way fare means the price of the direction you are actually traveling, not the whole round trip. 2 hours late or more, and it doubles again. 400% of the one-way fare, capped at $2,150. That same top bracket applies if the airline never offers you alternative transportation at all. So why does the title say up to 4 times the fare and not simply 4 times? Because the rule pays whichever is smaller, the percentage or the cap. On an expensive ticket, 400% hits the ceiling and stops there. The ceiling is the number most passengers actually meet. That is also why nobody should walk to a gate expecting a specific figure. The fare decides it, and the cap ends it. The airline is allowed to pay more than the cap. Section 250.5 says nothing stops it. The formula is a floor for them, not a limit. Leaving the United States on an international flight, the percentages and the caps are identical. Only the clock is wider. The 2-hour threshold becomes 4 hours. A 3-hour delay pays 400% domestically and 200% internationally. Those caps have a date on them. They apply to travel from the 22nd of January 2025 under a Federal Register final rule that raised them from $775 and $1,550. The rule also requires the Department of Transportation to lift them for inflation every 2 years, and as of August 2026, no newer revision had been published. The figures in this video are the current ones. They are also going to rise. All of it is United States law. The European Union runs a different system entirely, with fixed bands based on distance, so none of these percentages travel with you. Now, watch the American clock actually run. A passenger is denied boarding involuntarily on a domestic flight. The replacement is expected to land 40 minutes behind the original. The compensation counter sits at 0. The replacement slips. Expected arrival crosses 1 hour late, and the counter jumps to 200% of the one-way fare, with $1,075 sitting above it as a ceiling. It slips again. Expected arrival crosses 2 hours, and the counter jumps to 400%, ceiling $2,150. The percentage climbs, then the cap catches it and holds. Beside that counter, run the volunteers line. It is flat. It has no floor at all because the rule never gave it one. 3 words instead of a formula in any amount. Same flight, same delay, same seat, 2 completely different prices, and the one you get is decided by whether your hand went up. Which raises the question the airline would rather you did not ask. If the volunteer offer is a price, what is it a price for? It is a price for the number you never saw. There is a second half to Section 250.2b, and it is the most useful sentence in the entire regulation. The airline must tell every passenger it asks to volunteer before that passenger accepts, whether they are at risk of being denied boarding involuntarily and how much they would be owed if that happened. That is mandatory, not a favor from a helpful agent, not something you earn by being polite. The regulation forces the airline to put a price tag on the seat it is asking you to surrender, and it forces that disclosure to happen before you say yes. Then there is the voucher, which is where the two systems quietly separate again. A voucher is a transportation benefit, travel offered to you instead of money. Section 250.5 lets the airline offer that instead of cash, but only on 3 conditions. The value has to equal or beat the cash you are owed. The airline has to tell you the full cash amount and tell you that you may decline the travel and take the cash or check instead, and it has to disclose every material restriction before you choose, not after. Those conditions exist because the 2 things are not the same asset. Cash leaves. A voucher comes back, spent on the airline that issued it, on the airline's terms inside whatever restrictions were attached. So what does taking the cash actually look like? Section 250.8 is unusually specific. The airline must give you cash or a check you can immediately negotiate on the day the denied boarding happens and at the place it happened, not a claim form, not an email in 6 weeks. That day, at that airport. If they put you on a replacement flight that leaves before they can prepare the payment, they have 24 hours to send it. That is the whole basis for demanding cash. The move is 1 sentence said calmly to the airline representative. I am declining the travel voucher, and I am requesting the cash or immediately negotiable check due under Section 250.8, and I would like the amount stated. If what comes back is a claim form or a promise that something will arrive later, that is the moment to say the deadline out loud. The payment is due the same day, at the airport where it happened. The only exception the rule allows is a replacement flight leaving before they can prepare it, and then the clock is 24 hours. 2 more amounts get left behind constantly. Section 250.5 requires the airline to refund unused accessory fees, meaning the extras you paid for and never received. That refund applies to volunteers and involuntary passengers alike, and it is a separate amount from the compensation, so it is worth asking for separately. Award travel qualifies too, for a ticket bought without a cash fare. The compensation is calculated on the lowest fare charged for that class of service on that flight, so a points booking does not quietly become worth nothing. None of this fires automatically, though, and the exceptions are the reason most people who think they were owed money were not. Section 250.6 lists them. You have to have met the airline's own contract requirements for ticketing, reconfirmation, acceptability, and check-in. That last one is where most of this quietly collapses, and it is the only piece entirely in your hands. Miss the airline's stated check-in deadline, and every number in this video becomes 0. So check in before the deadline. Every time, including the flights you are certain are fine. The rest of the list is theirs, not yours. The airline owes nothing if it swapped in a smaller aircraft for operational or safety reasons. Nothing if it moves you to another section without charging you extra. Nothing if the replacement lands within 1 hour of your original arrival, and none of it applies if the flight was canceled outright, because a cancellation is not a denied boarding. That is a different rule entirely. The scope has edges too. Section 250.2 covers scheduled flights leaving a point in the United States on aircraft with 30 seats or more. Where the flight departs matters more than whose name is on the tail. There is one more piece, and it is the piece that shows the system rewriting itself. Section 250.7, added by the Tickets Act of 2018, says that once a passenger has checked in on time and had their boarding pass scanned and accepted at the gate, the airline cannot deny them boarding or remove them from the aircraft. The exceptions are narrow: a safety risk, a security risk, a health risk, or obscene, disruptive, or illegal conduct. That protection is recent. It arrived with a law passed in 2018, after footage from the year before showed a routine seat allocation decision being carried out on a real passenger. The system had been running that way for years. What changed was that everybody finally watched it run. Next time you are at a gate in the United States and that announcement starts, listen to it differently. You are hearing two systems at once. The public one, where the airline names a price and hopes enough hands go up, and the federal one waiting behind it, with a clock, a percentage, and a deadline the airline cannot negotiate. Here is the one thing worth doing before your next flight. Memorize the question because it is the only move that costs nothing and changes the entire calculation. When they ask for volunteers before you accept anything, ask them this: am I at risk of being denied boarding involuntarily, and how much would the airline owe me if that happens? Section 250.2b requires them to answer, and the answer tells you exactly what your hand is worth. Which leaves one question open. If being the involuntary passenger can pay this much more, how does the airline decide the involuntary passenger is you? That is not luck, and it is not a coin flip. And it is the next video, why the cheapest passenger always gets bumped first. If you made it this far, you are now one of the few passengers at that gate who knows what the announcement is actually asking for. Subscribe, and the next system running quietly around you gets taken apart the same way.